Yeah, oh, Prof here, and we got another video for you right quick, like, and yes, I know the workbench is just getting more and more and more full. This was the James brand. I actually finally bought the bottle opener from them. This is their version of like something like the Tough XL, which they call the Palmer. If you notice, it's got the sticker back on it. Yeah, it's going back. I got approval to send it back. Bottle opener, amazing quality. That thing, if it was closer to the pictures, it'd be better. But, oh, by the way, we have his little kitten. That's Paisley Marie. She's the new kitten of the house. Picked her up from a farm I was working at. So yeah, I gotta do the Subaru stuff. This one turned out, a lot of you say that's like way too much. I agree, but they want you to use half, and the problem is I could see it on a Type-C or a Lightning connector. But if you want to go over the molding on the USB-A, or especially the 30-pin, you can't use a half pack. You wouldn't even make it down to the strain relief. It's gonna be a little bit messier to do with this guy here because it's got the clips. I'll have to like make sure I go around those somehow. But this video isn't about that. It's about this one. Hey, Paisley. Yeah, don't eat cables. You can see my microphone right there, so I'm not using that because this is real quick. Like, I brought up the T9. I think I made a video that I was finally using my T7 shield because my desktop is built, or I might have mentioned it in the desktop build that I finally upgraded to this guy. Build quality on this is like a billion times better than the T7. The T7 originally shipped as the T7 Touch. They wanted like a fingerprint reader on it. I don't want that shit. Proprietary with that. It means I can't just go plug it into anything. Yeah, it's kind of like it makes sense in a sense, but I don't know if I even see the T7 Touch anymore. Like, this is essentially what people wanted. And then it turned out, because this has no rubber on it whatsoever, that's why you see me adding feet to it here, right? Whereas like the T3, its design is iconic to the point where Western Digital knocked it off in a number of their drives, and it has like a rubberized end on it so it doesn't move around and stuff like that. I put some e-grips on this one. But you can see all the edges are like silver, essentially, because it's just been in my bag, been in use, etc. And yeah, it's seen its wear, but it's aluminum, so it's fine. But I'm definitely happy they came out with the T7 Shield. Now, I know why they didn't come out with this originally, because had they done, yes, I got beige. I actually think it looks awesome. I don't know, because it hasn't left the... Oh my God, we have a kitten doing kitten things over here, guys. I don't know how it's going to hold up wear-wise, because... Oh, you can see the connector is definitely recessed more. So it's definitely just... This is essentially just a mold or a case on top of this probably already. Very much looks like that. Because this hasn't even left the house yet. If you guys are interested in picking this guy up off me, let me know, because it's basically not going to get used anymore. Sad day. I shouldn't have taken so long to get my desktop working, essentially. Not that I can't use it for like backups or transfers or temporary holding data. I mean, it's 2 terabytes of external USB NVMe storage. If you're running, guys, that's the big difference between the T5, which it was like industry standard. In some cases, those are actually more compatible because they don't have NVMe. They also have less power draw. To the T7 is they finally switched from it essentially being a SATA SSD with a SATA to USB controller to being an NVMe SSD and it going straight to USB. Now, it's still only USB 3.2 Gen 2. That's the 10 gigabit one. Both of these are. and like SSDs could easily exceed that for quite some time. Even back when they had the T5, theoretically the NAND in there was faster than the controller because they had to go from to SATA to USB essentially. Whereas now we're not doing that anymore. This guy's basically had barely any use. I've loaded all my stuff up on there, like my tools, my benchmarking, and stuff like that. And it's set up with the new computer. But basically, the week after I finally opened that up and set it up, this guy was announced. Along with this was announced right all around when the 4TB 990 Pro was announced. And that 4TB 990 Pro can happen. It's actually still a single-sided drive. They didn't pull like a Sabrent and do a double-sided M.2, so to maintain compatibility. The reason why it took so long for the 4TB to come out is they didn't think there would be demand, but now like 1TB is kind of like the standard, and 4TB drives are becoming more and more common, because it always used to be like with those really high performance drives, like even most people would stick to a terabyte. Even the 2TB was uncommon, but they, especially with the reduction in NAND cost, etc., 2TB is like normal pricing. Like there's no price difference between a 1 and a 2TB. Sometimes even now the 2TB can be cheaper per gig. Like say your terabyte drive is like, $70, $80, and I got my 2TB 990 Pro as $130. I've seen them also at $135 on a recent Black Friday. So like, and that's as far as the 990 Pros went. Later on in life as well, the T7s got a 4TB version. I think they added like the red option, and that added the 4TB version. I personally, realistically here too, don't necessarily have a need for a 4TB, but the cost is not that much more. Realistically, due to how cheap NAND is. Oh, you can see here, like I got dings and dents in the anodized finish on this thing too. This is where having like a rubberized coating or something like that, or like an overmold like this, much nicer to have. Now this, like, I don't know how well this. It seems like it would do well. I've recommended these to people in the past. They've bought the gray ones. Because they're like, oh, when you say get a T7, what one? I mean the tough one, if it's available. This was also later on available as a 4TB. Not when I bought it though, I don't think. Maybe it was the red Shield. Sorry, not tough. Shield version that came as 4TB. Either way, they're available. I've kind of just always increased mine for reference, so I have a 2TB T7 in Shield, and then I have a 1TB T5. I think they made 2TB versions. Just didn't have a need at the time because my main boot drive was a terabyte. Now my main boot drive was going to be 2TB, and it is in the home theater PC as well already. Well, with the 980 Pro 4TB coming out, actually having better performance too because it has the new NAND. It's got higher density. Actually more endurance supposedly as well. Like the Samsung, they basically just put better NAND flash in it. And that is why the 990 Pro 4TB is a different SKU. They label it as a 990 because it's not like a generational change. But realistically, the terabyte and 2TB, I don't think there's a 500 gig. Those are essentially the same drives, right? Whereas the 4TB actually uses different NAND flash internally. If you're she likes attention. And she's got her little kitten collar that's orange and has mice on it. Look at that. So T9 came out just basically as I was finally putting this into service. Literally cracked open the box for that T7 Shield 2TB 2 weeks ago. And then within a week later, I see advertisements where they're talking about the T9. And people are actually complaining about the T9 because everybody thinks that this should use USB 4. And it's just USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2, which is 20 gigabit, whereas USB 4 would be 20 gigabit. I think technically they could do a USB 4 connection and only do 20 gigabit. like because USB 4 is a lot like Thunderbolt in that way. Because the Gen 2 by 2 is actually a bi-directional. So it basically uses, you know how you can flip a USB-C cable over? Well, there's double the conductors in order to be able to do that, essentially. And that's how it determines which way it is. Well, on Gen 2 by 2, they just use all of them. And that's what Samsung opted to do here with the T9. And everybody's saying, like, oh, it's to save money. Probably, but like if a USB 4 drive would be so much more money, you know, this is still twice as fast as the T7 is, and the T7 was already a good bit faster than T7 caps out about 1,000 megabytes a second. This is about, I would say I get 8 to 900 on most systems. If it's like a newest system, especially like a USB 4 port, you'll get the full 1,000 out of a T7. With a T5, you're kind of around, I think that gained 10 gigabit USB on it, but it's still through a SATA controller, so you don't get the full bandwidth there, because you know, like basically USB 3.1 was 10 gigabit USB, whereas the T3, much older drive, is like first gen Type C. That's 3.0, USB 3.0 essentially, so 5 gigabit. But with the T5, it actually is like dead reliable and everything as it is. You didn't see much of a speed increase from the 3 to the 5. The 5 also did have this same design. I did put e-grips on it as well. They went to more of this aluminum. Just I think I got a blue one. I like bright colors. That's kind of why I went tan. I mean, tan's not a bright color. I don't think the red one was available when I ordered it originally. They're very like blasé colors in the original Shield. And if I recall, for the T7 as well, it might have even been the same thing with the T5. Like only certain colors were certain drive sizes. They're trying to pull the whole like Apple thing, and I think Samsung does it with their phones, where it's like, oh, if you want the exclusive color, you got to get the 512 gig or whatever the massive phone size is at the time. In this case, T9, as far as I can tell, it comes in black, which I am fine with. And if you look at it on the camera here, to me, that looks like it has overmold out of the gate. And I think that's because basically all they ended up selling once the T7 Shield came out, this is what most people bought. Not this, because this is basically the T7 Touch without the touch thing. And I think originally the T7 was only in the touch. I waited like an extra in order to buy this guy, who's seen a ton of use. Actually in a shorter period of time, because the T5 was out for forever. This has seen more data go through it than the T5 in a shorter period of time. I mean, it's bigger, so that kind of makes sense, I guess. All my drives are still good, by the way. I've only ever had one Samsung external SSD be bad. And that was bad out of the gate. It wasn't like something that like wore out later on. So something to keep in mind is to get the full speed of this, you have to use a USB-C cable, one rated for 20 gigabit or higher. Like a USB 4 cable would be fine as well. They do ship one in here that'll do the 20 gigabit. Also, you cannot do USB-A and get the full speed of this. Basically on USB-A, you're going to be restricted to the speeds of this guy. Just something to keep in mind. That thing is dense. I wonder if they put some heat sinking in here. It is definitely like an overmold. I can't just peel this off. Like if you look at like a C drive, that orange that you see on there isn't an overmold. It's like more of a like the Wiimote grips, like what they call those like Wiimote condoms. It's more of a thing that like goes over top of it. Some of the later ones are overmolded. Those actually have bad hard drives in them though. They use the forget what the terminology for them is, but it's the Seagate Slim 1 TB in there, and those will just kill themselves. So this thing like actually looks beautiful. Like as an external SSD can, like they actually show that on the box, like the design here with the lines. See, like line, diagonal like that. I think it looks really nice. T7 to T7 Shield, they just kind of made it look tough. This is kind of a classic look of the bumpers. That you could even get like hard drive cases where you'd like put that over like a Western Digital hard drive or something. Usually you'll see though. If you look at this design here, that's very much the same as the T7 Shield, like the shape here. What we're not seeing though is, we hold this up here, because the T7 Shield, right, is basically a T7 with this added backplate on it and this overmold. That port's much more recessed. You can see that's not the case with the T9, and that is probably because out of the gate, being that this ended up being the most popular one, like this is what people were asking for, and that's how we use these external SSDs. Are like, you want a durable drive you can chuck in your bag and back things up and not have to worry about it. Like, whereas these can dent, etc. Now, technically, like an SSD, there's no moving parts, so it denting isn't the end of the world. But wouldn't it be great if it didn't do that in the first place? I don't know if you can see that for those looking here. The T9 actually finally went to a bigger design. So here they slimmed it down. It's a little bit longer, slightly wider than the T5, which I have a kitten in my lap right now, so I can't really go and get it. For those that don't believe me, there's kitten. So, this definitely got thinner. Wait, I don't know if that's good or bad. I like the size because the T5 and T3 were the same size exactly. Both drives really nice. You can see that the T9 gained some girth. I know how much T7 I've been, literally it's been in my camera bag for a long time, since it's released in its non-touch form. Like I had it pre-ordered, because also this is like a 2 TB. The 1 TB was getting tight for how I use it, which is I keep my entire tools folder on this drive, and then I use it for repairs. I just plug that in, and then I have full external SSD performance of my tools drive. Then I also now have my benchmarks drive, so that's going to have like an install of Steam with all the benchmarks I run through Steam already downloaded and installed in there. It'll have like UniEngine installed to the drive, so I can just execute it as long as the correct, like you got your Visual C++ and your DirectX and that sort of stuff installed in the system. You can just run these benchmarks off of my drives rather than having to install them on the system, etc. Yeah, this is noticeably. Oh, the rubber they have too. Look at this. It's like squishy now. Whereas this is like definitely like an overmold, like you'd see on a drill or something. A little bit softer than that. But like this, like I noticed once again, this is like a modified version of this. So they had to follow the lines of this, and it looks like they put a like an end cap on it. You know what I mean? Like right there, you can tell that there's a cap on top of that cap, essentially, in order to match up the lines of the overmold. This has the T9 has a much squishier, as I just knocked those, they're SSDs, they're fine, they're not plugged in either. Much squishier rubber. Hopefully that holds up. Like this, I can definitely tell over time that's gonna hold up. Like it's got some, but for drops and stuff, it's not absorbing as much. Though, once again, like I said, SSD. So does that really matter? Now, to me, what it feels like is though it's thicker, that the overmold on here might actually be, like it wraps around more on the edge, but it might actually be thinner. I might be wrong there. But it feels like there's more meat inside and the drive itself is a bit thicker. Weight is definitely increased. In this one, the weight increase should just be from the extra pieces and the over molded rubber. Rubber can actually be quite heavy. You know what I mean? These look really clean too, the T7 shields, I always thought. But I saw the new design for the T9 and I'm like, oh, they finally went back to their roots. This reminds me of a Samsung, like, this texture, if I could go and get it, is the same as a T1. Like this, like the texture on here, except it's rubberized instead of being plastic like the original. The original was just hard plastic. It was micro B. Also reminds me of a T3. Like, it got a little bit chonkier. Now, hopefully what they did, because this is doing faster, remember, it is doing twice the speed of this guy right here. Twice the speed of this guy. Hopefully, yeah, you can see that it's just an overmold with that height too. There's your height difference. So it's basically the end cap. They added plastic so that they could put the overmold, you know. Height-wise of a T9, T9 is actually even a little bit taller than that because it really seems like this rubber wraps around the internal more. Like they made a new internal and then wrapped it in a nice squishy rubber external. That, like I said, evokes the design of the original, except the original was just hard plastic and kind of gets scratches super easily. Hard to find a good... The T3 was when it really took off. Like the T1's kind of... I don't know if that many people use the T1. T3 though, crazy. T5, when I was doing photography stuff for class and stuff like that, I would always carry two T5s in my bag. I think two 500 gigs. That was when I took my trip in 2018 out to Portland and Seattle as well. Carried two in there. One in my camera bag, one in my luggage. Dumped everything from the cards to both. That way, unless something happened, you know. And that's kind of how I was planning on using these was, yes, I know they're different drives, but they're both the same drive. And both 2 terabytes. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do here. We're going to see how well this guy performs. Do I buy another one? Or since this thing is brand new, do I just rock this with it? And, I mean, the likelihood of me needing 4 terabytes is quite unlikely. The nice thing, though, is like I could dump... Like, I have my entire music collection right now on this one, as well as my entire games drive, because I had to transfer that. So it's like 600 gigs for the games drive, I want to say, and 600 gigs for the music collection. That's on here with all my tools, with all the benchmarks, and I still got like 200 gigs. Will the other stuff will be temporarily on there, you know, like the games and the music, because I just needed to transfer it, and that was the quickest way to do it. Sadly, not a lot of my computers have 10 gigabit Ethernet, but not everything does, and sometimes it's just you need another copy too, especially when I'm wiping drives, setting up the computers. So that's super nice. But this, it feels like it's got some weight to it, and it's not just rubber weight, which it was in this guy. Hopefully they added more heat sinking, because this thing, when you're hitting it, will overheat and throttle. And you can kind of do stuff because it's just raw aluminum casing here. But and I can understand why we wouldn't fin it or anything like that. But I'm hoping that there's basically, like, inside of here, because there's no external aluminum. There's no external aluminum to sink heat. I haven't had enough use of this guy to see how it would compare to the original T7 when it came to, like, overheating performance, because theoretically this is going to be worse because it's just the T7 covered in rubber. I'd take the durability over, and I wouldn't even say durability, because technically this is plenty durable. It's super lightweight though. When you put it on a surface, it'll move around if you don't put E-grips on it, whereas this, throw it on a surface, it's not, I mean, I can slide it, I guess, like, a little bit, right? But this thing, if you don't put E-grips or rubber grip or rubber feed or something on it, the weight of the cable will just slide it off a surface. So it's actually like I said, I think they learned over time, like, we didn't want the touch thing. You just use software if you needed encryption. People were complaining about the durability, and they fixed that with the shield. Then that was basically, what they sold. And the T9 is basically just that. It's a T7 shield that has 20 gigabit, but it feels way heftier. So hopefully that went into thermal mass inside of there, like maybe like a copper thing on the controller, or just like a thicker casing to dissipate more heat. I'm not sure. Um, we'll have to see when I start using it. I'm gonna first throw it on the server and do a pre-clear on the drive. And you're like, yeah, it's for hard drives. Like, why would you do that on SSD? Well, I just did what I had notes down as a brand new or nearly brand new SSD with like, I don't remember how many hours it had on it, but like hours of uptime, not days of uptime, hours of uptime. And it had 300 something CRC errors. And that one wasn't in a box, brand new. Compared to the actual brand new one that I literally pulled out of a box, no issues whatsoever on that one. So though I had a note on it that was basically brand new based on the stats, there's a reason why I didn't have that other drive in use. Turns out it's like an internal, it's the 860 Evo, because it actually either had failed or is failing with all those CRC errors. I'll need to look into that. I do have two other ones that I've labeled as like new or mostly new. We'll have to check on uptime, etc. on those. But this guy is brand spanking new. You saw me take it out of the box. I like that it actually has a little bit more heft. Size is a little bit bigger. Like it's actually a little bit wider in every dimension. It's a little bit bigger than a T7 Shield even, which I don't necessarily mind. This is kind of getting close to the T3, I would say, like in size wise, which was still perfectly sized. Um, and I guess the rubber molding technically, because it's an SSD, like mine's taking some hits. You can see like where stuff's falling on it and taking chips out of the paint, and like it's scratched all over. And I just chuck it in my bag, so a lot of these corners are shined up to silver because it's wearing off the anodizing, because the anodizing only goes so deep. You can see right there too. I'm guessing I dropped it like tunk. And it's still fine, right? It's just like with an overmold like the Shield, or even better now on the T9, you're just like more confident that that sort of shit won't happen, you know? The weight on this is significant, and I can't just be, because like I said, the rubber actually looks thinner than on the Shield. We'll have to get some performance going on it. My desktop, I don't know if on the front port it has 10 gigabit or 20 gigabit. I know on the back it does. I believe the new my Surface Laptop Studio has Thunderbolt 4, which should include support for 20 gigabit USB 3.1 Gen 2x2. That's also why I like the external SSDs, for those wondering, like at least the Samsung ones, which is what I always buy. Ever since, because I've done a lot of testing if we go back years, especially when I was at Best Buy, because I could get like you'd get accommodations, they would call them, like huge discounts on stuff because they want you to try out the new product. And like other brands would not have UASP, which is Universal Attached SCSI Protocol, which makes USB into like more of a storage, because USB is not a storage connection actually. Like it's not. It's meant for connecting all different sorts of things, but it's not meant as a storage connection. Like a lot of people use it that way with drives like this. Um, but even back in the like when we started going from 5 gigabit to 10 gigabit USB, I would still rather have used the Samsung T3 than the equivalent Western Digital ones. The reason being is the Western Digital drives, which now have all these failure issues, basically don't buy a Western Digital or a SanDisk external SSD. Reporters have lost content because what would happen a lot of times is they shoot all their video, they chuck it, they put it on one of these, and they mail it actually back to the studio and stuff like that. When it got there, it would be dead because there's actually like a hard coded like on time limit essentially that's miscoded in there, that kills them. And that's another issue that's in there. But like back in the day when they went to 10 gigabit, Western Digital had the 10 gigabit, but in real world performance, because the T3, which was only 5 gigabit, could do UASP and actually show up as like a storage drive, your actual real world performance was way better. Like sequential looked better on the Western Digital, but the actual usable real world performance was better on the generation older T3. And that's happened too. Like I've in the past done taken NVMe, or I've not even before NVMe. I've taken M-SATA, MPCIe SSDs, M.2 SATAs, and then later on I had a 600p Intel 600p that I threw into an external enclosure that was a 10 gigabit. The compatibility of those, and you're like, why would they be any less compatible? I don't know. All I know is that Samsung does their testing, and they always have. Um, Even the T1 works over Type C properly, as long as you have the correct cable for it. Um, and I use my T3 and T5s all the time plugged into my phone, like LG G6. Um, and it recognized no problem. That's another thing that you run into with like using a desktop NVMe drive in an external enclosure. Try plugging that in your phone once. It probably doesn't provide enough power. Whereas all of these are tested, and if we look on the box, they'll actually list like Android as a supported operating system. Compatibility supports PC phones and other devices. TM, you need Samsung Magician, which they just updated by the way now, which is awesome. Samsung Magician now supports with the same version of Magician all of your internal drives, your NVMe drives, and all of your external SSDs. So I could even go back through and update like my T3, or I think it was the T5 had an update that, because previously, unless you installed the specific Samsung Magician software for the external drives, it wouldn't see them, which is dumb because I already had the internal Samsung Magician software, or it couldn't do firmware updates and stuff like that. The new update is awesome. So yeah, here Windows 7, Mac OS, Android 5.1 or newer. Like, that's all you need. Now, obviously, on all of those, it's not going to get 20 gigabits a second, which is about 2,000 megabytes a second, roughly, with overhead and whatnot. But from my experience, these are the most dead reliable. If you just, the other thing is they're everywhere. With a T5, you could go into any store anywhere and buy them if they carried products like this. You just know it'll be there. Even if they carry other brands, a lot of times for external SSDs, they'll still have the Samsung one. You also, unlike Western Digital too, like Western Digital has like they have these ones that look like kind of like their hard drives with like a hole in, but like the cable they give you doesn't. There's nowhere to store it. So why would you just hang that on your bag with a hole in it? I don't know. I have had like 3 of those because I got them so cheap through work. Those were like a follow up from their original. They're fine. They're not good. But there's like 5, 6, 10 different models. Whereas Samsung, like, and they'll do Western Digital loves doing mid-cycle refreshes. Like, as in, they'll not change the outside of the device and change the guts inside without telling you. Samsung, at least, even when they changed a part on, I believe it was the 980 Pro, it got a different model number. Like, it was still called a 980 Pro, but they had a revision because they had to change up during COVID what NAND flash was in there. If we look at the 970, there was originally just a 970, not the 970 Evo. Technically, the 970 is actually a better performing drive than the Evo. The Evo is actually a cost down version of it. Or is it Evo to Evo Plus? Sorry, that's what it is. The Plus is actually like worse than the Evo in that case. But when they changed parts, they didn't pull a Western Digital where they had an amazing drive at one point, and Kingston has done that shit as well on their internal SSDs, where they had I think it was like the V30 or something like that, was a amazing value drive. And then over time, they'd be like, oh, well, we swapped out the NAND because we couldn't get any more. We swapped out the controller because we couldn't get any more. We swapped out the DRAM cache, and later on, they even took away the DRAM cache. They still had the same branding, the same label, the same model number. It was only like sub-model numbers that were changed. Whereas for the most part here, Samsung, okay, you had the T7 Touch that had a fingerprint reader. The T7 Non-Touch doesn't have a fingerprint reader. Then you added a thing. You called it a T7 Shield. Awesome. Then when they came with the 4TB, just like with the 990 Pro 4TB, it had a different model because it was like actually different from the original. Like there's like a sub model number or something in there. Or they came with a different color, like it was red now. Hey, if you want the 4TB, you gotta get the red one. I appreciate that. You know what I mean? where like you walk in and you're like, I want a Samsung T9. They'd be like, here you go. They might ask you what color for some of these older ones. Some of them in the past would come in different colors. T1 didn't have a color. T3 was the same beautiful like gunmetal and rubber end on it. That thing sold so well. Like I said, that Western Digital, even some external drive brands where you put your own drive into it have knocked off kind of like the look and the design language of the T3. Then with the T5, they added different colors, and those colors were actually like bound to different sizes. Like if you had a 500 gig, it'd be like I think 500 and a terabyte, or no, 250 and 500 were a color, terabyte and 2 terabyte were a color. Kind of weird. But they kind of carried that up through the T7 in some ways. But stick to, in my opinion, unless you're using a drive that you already have. Like I have a couple like 250 or 500 gig drives, but realistically, SSDs are so cheap right now that just buy a dedicated, proper external SSD. Use it for your backups. Use it for transferring data. Heck, just keep it in your backpack. You never know when you're gonna need it. Even if you need to quick back up your phone, like you're shooting 4K 60 video like we are right now when there's no need to, and the phone fills up, you can dump it to here, if you really have to. It's just handy to have. Or like when you're on your desktop shits the bed, and you're like, oh, I got to reformat it. Where do I put all my stuff? Well, you got this guy. You can at least do, in this case, it's 4 terabytes. I can do my entire main OS drive now since I'm upgrading to that 990 Pro 4 terabyte. That's why I like having a size drive the same size as like the average boot drive in my systems, which used to be a terabyte. So everything was fine. Then, like I said, things started going 2 terabyte. Home theater PC needs it. Games are getting bigger, and there's only one drive in there for at least like fast storage. And did the same with the desktop. Just bought a 2 terabyte right away with the 990 when that came out. And now that the 4 terabytes out, I'm going to move that 2 terabyte 990 over to the repair PC and give it the 4 terabyte because it does actually have better performance. 990 was already as fast as you can be for a Gen 4 drive on the sequential, but because of the new NAND, you have double the density, so the random, everything's close together. You actually get better random performance out of it. So they've refined that design even more. And let me know your comments down below. Maybe you don't think the same way I can. All I'll tell you is that I have used personally made drives all the way back to like you'd use the old 250 gig IDE, not even, that wouldn't be 250 gig, 40 gig, 80 gig, but mostly like I started doing this when SATA hard drives out of laptops, right? You'd pop in a SSD like a 120 gig, and you'd pull out the 250 gig hard drive because the 120 was fine back then. Then you make that an external drive for backing up. You know what I mean? I've used stuff from back then. That was serviceable for that sort of stuff. But nothing beats a properly designed and engineered external drive product compared to everything else. And just from my experience, Samsung knows what they're doing with these, has since day zero, and has just kept it up. And as you can see, you can even see the generational thing here. They went from having a fingerprint reader nobody bought to not, and they even said there was such a bad reception, for those wondering, with the fingerprint reader. Even when it was announced, they said, hey, in coming months, the next batch will be available in fingerprint reader and non-fingerprint reader, which is what I waited for. Then people, basically places were selling external shields like this for it, and Samsung's like, why don't we just make it from the factory that way? Awesome. Then this is the one that ever since it's been out, that's all that anybody buys is the T7 shield. So what happens? T9 comes out, boom. T7 shield, one color, black, clean. That's all. This is all this needs to be right here. The only thing that is kind of a little bit of an issue with this, and I think you could still mark here with like a paint marker, like a very fine point paint marker or something, is labeling these. Because a lot of people that use these for their job are going to use many of them. maybe not like a 10 or something, but like they're gonna have more than one of these, because if you're doing it for photography, you want two. Like I said, I carried one in my camera bag on me, carried one in my luggage, or when I would go out, I would take one with me, keep it on me. Say you get mugged or something. Ideally, that doesn't happen, but you never know. You leave the other one in the hotel. And that way you don't lose it because it's still back at the hotel. Say the room service person steals your shit, or somebody breaks in and steals your shit, you still have the one on you, etc. And take that to next level, essentially, for the more professional you get, essentially. But it's surprising how many things rely on these external drives for storage and or at least transport of data. That's really been shown, especially still in like what's left of written media and like TV and that sort of stuff. When these these newer Western digital ones they're just dying out of nowhere, like just poof, gone. Um, and Yeah, just they were people bought them because they're cheaper, or they say they're better performance. The thing is with the Samsungs is they may not be the cheapest. An internal drive in many cases will be cheaper, but this will plug into literally anything. Your smart TV it'll probably even plug into. Um, and it may not be the most performant, but it will perform up to the standard of whatever connection is on. Like this hits 1,000. I would. I haven't tested it yet. I guess I'll get back to you if it doesn't hit 2,000. But I'd be very surprised if it doesn't hit 2,000. Um, and everything else prior to that, it'll hit what it says it'll hit, which may not be the fastest thing. But the fact that a lot of these other brands say, "Oh, we're faster, but that's a little bit on the packaging, and we're cheaper, so you should buy this instead." Then you actually test it, and you find out like, "Oh, well, that's only in sequential that you're faster, and you don't have UASP, Universal Attached SCSI Protocol, so it doesn't actually show up as a drive when it's plugged into your desktop. It's still using standard USB, which latency wise is way worse, random access wise is way worse. The list goes on. This guy actually right here, and I have in the past when I'm using my ITX rig, which can only have one NVMe drive in it, used and edited off of. A lot of people that run Macs will use these for editing. This is basically, as long as you don't have an issue with your USB controller, which, oh god, good god, there's so many issues. Freaking 2080 Ti had the best USB controller ever. I'm sad that I lost it when I went to the 3080 Ti. I really wish that Virtual Link port stayed just because of the amazing USB controllers on them. But with the T5 as well, when I used Chibi PC in the past, I want to say around 2017, I ran it for a whole year while I was working on building my desktop and doing water cooling for the first time and fucking it up a bunch of times and stuff like that. And it was my external editing drive. Literally, that's because it was faster than, like, Chibi PC at the time had a boot M.2. I think it was a M.2 SATA. I don't think it was an MDV at the time. And then it had 4 hard drives in it. And for editing 4K footage, the 4 hard drives, even though they were in RAID 10, so those, there's essentially a 2x on the speed there. It wasn't fast enough for full res 4K. Whereas take a T5, which is only 600 megabits a second, something like that, at best, or 5 something. That's still crushing a hard drive, especially when it comes to skipping around stuff. And ran flawlessly once I was done and didn't need it in that position anymore. You use it the same way I use these drives, which is basically carry it around, always get it in my bag or car or backpack. Sometimes people need help, or you head over there, oh, grandparents are having an issue, and you're like, oh crap, this is way bigger than you thought it was. Let's get all your stuff, backed up. If you have this in one of these, and you don't need this entire thing here, but say you got your computer in one flash drive, which I always keep 1 or 2 on my keys. Very few things I can't make a flash drive for, boot into it, and at least pull data off people for. You need somewhere for that to go. So let me know your thoughts down below. What are your experiences with these external drives? Some of the more boutique brands like Angel Bird and stuff like that, depending on what you're doing, I could see getting those. once again, though, these might not be the most amazing. Actually, the T9 seems pretty damn good. And the T7 really upped the, like the speed at the time. You'd still build yourself one that was faster, but there might be reasons that you might buy some of those boutique ones. They can actually be really good. Make sure you're testing all of this stuff out in your own environment for a while before you're like, oh, I completely trust it. You know what I mean? It's gonna happen with this guy. This guy hasn't been wiped yet because I just had finished transferring over to this guy, and I wanted to use it a bit more before I wipe this and reset it to just be like a backup essentially of that or something. Same thing's gonna happen with this. Though I will probably just wipe this one because it's been in use for so little amount of time. But yeah, make sure you're testing all your stuff. Same thing with your desktop. Don't consider it good until you do your normal workflow on it and it doesn't crash or doesn't act weird. Until you do that, it's not good, stable, whatever. And even when you think it is, your 8-year-old SSD used for games is going to die and then kill stuff, which then is going to make your PC not boot. And yep, and you'll figure out how overpriced SATA drives are nowadays. Rip. Well, guys, have a good one as always. We went on way too long, but hopefully you get some of my thoughts on these external SSDs. I know we didn't have any performance on the T9, but here's the thing. You really don't need it. As long as it meets the performance it says on the box, which all of Samsung's always have for their external drives. So I don't imagine this won't. As long as it meets that, it'll do exactly what I want. I might do some testing myself under load and see if it's overheating less or more or whatever. But physically, I think it's already an improvement. So let me know if you guys want to follow up on what you want to see, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.